Hello and welcome to the 10th episode of Magic the Judging. I've hit double figures, woohoo! At least I'm reliably informed this is the 10th from my chat window here by Charlie Hurrell. So if I've got that wrong, and this is actually not my 10th episode, then I'm sorry for kind of jumping the gun on that celebration there. We can all blame Charlie and beat him up later about it or something. No, I'm not going to blame you. I'm not going to beat you up, Charlie. Don't worry about that. I do absolutely love everybody who gets involved in the stream, comes and watches it live, comes into this chat window right here, and talks to me about what I'm doing here. Gives me questions, gives me ideas, gives me inspiration, gives me motivation. Why do I keep coming back here every single week with stuff prepared to talk to you about? It's because of you. It's because of you guys, especially you, Charlie. Mwah. Something like that. Now I've totally scared him off. Right. I had a topic in mind for this week, and I'm not going to get out of it. It's layers. Why haven't I tackled layers until now? One, because I wanted to get into a bit of a role on the stream, cover some simpler topics first, cover some more interesting topics first. Also, layers, it's a big topic. It's a very well covered topic. You can find lots of articles on the web about it. They were changed back in M10 times. They were changed only kind of subtly, but they were changed about the same time as combat damage came off of the stack. Everybody remembers that part of the change. The fact that layers changed a little bit underneath it was maybe didn't quite get the headline that it needed. But they're very well covered because they're very complicated to remember. But really, once you've actually got stuff written down in front of you and you've got some idea of just what it is you're talking about, they're really not that tricky to put together after all. And I hope you will agree with me after we've been through some examples. So let's have a look at some cards. I'm gonna pop my fake card up here. I don't know if you can read any of this at all. I'm gonna have to resize my window here just so that I can read it at all. Lots and lots of abilities on that one. It's a fantastic little mnemonic for remembering how the layers go. I'm actually not going to start this stream with a rundown of the layers, how the layers fit together, what's in what layer, and so on. What I am going to start with is I'm kind of going to turn it on its head. You don't often see dependency discussed quite so much. You see it discussed kind of in the context of layers, and you tend to spend a lot of energy getting layers right, and then going, oh, and there's this other thing called dependency on the end. I'm going to start with dependency, which actually might be the trickier thing for you guys to get your heads around. But I've had some specific questions about dependency on my Twitter account recently, so I'd like to use those. I'd like to make sure I deal with those, and then I can kind of whiz through the layers a bit later, because really the only trouble with layers, the hard part with layers, is just remembering how it all fits together. So let's start with a very simple version of dependency. What I want to say about dependency, and I'm going to flip to an article called The 7 Layer Cake by Justin Turner, which is on gatheringmagic.com. I'm gonna post the link in the chat right now if you want to follow along. You should be able to Google it otherwise. And he starts this one with dependency, which I'm quite pleased about. There's a couple of examples of dependency here. There are some. One of the things about dependency is people tend to remember it by the hardest version, the most complicated version of the thing that they're trying to remember. But let's start with some simple ones. I've got a grizzly bears in play. So there's just a nice little grizzly bears in play, and we put mind control on it. So far, everything's absolutely fine. What does mind control do? It gives you control of the enchanted creature. So if you had a Grizzly Bears in play and I put mind control on it, then I will control the enchanted creature. How do I know that I will control the enchanted creature? It's because that's exactly what mind control says. Mind control says you control enchanted creature. And it's important to note that you has a specific meaning in Magic. You means the controller of this card. So if we wanted to write this out in longhand, mind control would actually say the controller of this card controls enchanted creature. Okay. So what would happen if my opponent, you guys, have got your Grizzly Bears out, and I've used the mind control to grab it, and you use a mind control on the bears, itself? Well, this is quite a simple resolution. We've got two abilities that both say somebody's going to control this enchanted creature, and we have to work out what order they go in. So we have to work out that one of the effects is giving control to me, and one of the effects is giving control to you. And whichever order we resolve them in is going to make a huge difference. Whoever actually ends up with the bear is going to be the difference made here. So in this case, it's quite simple. There's nothing really to compete between the two effects. They're absolutely identical effects. The only logical way to sort this out is to have my mind control take effect first because I cast it first, and for your mind control to take effect second because you cast it second. Meaning that your mind control works, it gets the bears back. So what we have is a bears with a mind control on it, with another mind control on it, but it's controlled by you. What we call that is we call it timestamp order, because every permanent, when it comes into play, gets given a timestamp. It says, this is when I hit the battlefield, this is my timestamp. And one of the ways that we resolve the interaction between competing continuous effects is through timestamp. We just go, look, you were here first, so you go first. You were here second, so you go second. Now, in this case, second happens to be good. Are you still following me? Yes? Good. It's not hard, is it? This isn't hard. Two mind controls. Which one happens first? Well, the one that happened first happens first. It's not so hard. Not so hard. I've made a small error in my card preparation here, because I actually forgot that mind control says that you control the enchanted creature and it can only hit creatures. So I need to stall for a few moments while I pretend that I had control magic all along in here instead of mind control, and then I can get on to my my next situation. Go on. I must have control magic downloaded here somewhere. No. Okay. Magiccards.info to the rescue. Control magic. Why do I care about control magic? Because, no, control magic enchants creatures as well. Oh, I mean Volition Reigns. Do I mean Volition Reigns? Someone tell me that I mean a Volition Reigns. That's the one. You control enchanted permanent. That's what I was looking for. Let's save that as an image somewhere I can bring it into the stream. Oh, so professional. I am so professional. There is Volition Reigns. There it goes into the stream. There I turned the sound on it. And we have Volition Reigns. Woo! Okay, so I want you to imagine that Volition Reigns is in play. The reason that I'm talking about Volition Reigns here is because it can enchant any kind of permanent. This is the simplest way, one of the simplest ways I can think of to set a dependency up. So we've got our Grizzly Bears in play. Fine. It's your Grizzly Bears. You control that. You out there in the ether control the Grizzly Bears. And I'm going to put Volition Reigns on it. So I want it. I control the enchanted permanent. Brilliant. But you come along, you want to spoil my plans, and you're going to play a Volition Reigns on my Volition Reigns. So you knew that if you played it on the Grizzly Bears itself, you'd retain control of the Grizzly Bears because of the timestamp order. You knew that, but you just wanted to construct a different situation for me, just to baffle me. So what you did was you put Volition Reigns on my Volition Reigns. Now, let's go back to that 7-layer cake article by Justin Turner. For something to qualify as a dependency, What is a dependency? An effect depends on another effect if applying one first would either cause the other one to no longer apply, or would change what it did, or would change how it did what it did. Here's a great example, because Volition Reigns has that line, as I said, you control Enchanted Permanent, or in longhand, the controller of the Volition Reigns controls the thing it is enchanting also. So the reason Volition Reigns gives me control of the Grizzly Bears is because I control the Volition Reigns. Well, except when you come along with your Volition Reigns and you take control of my Volition Reigns, what you are doing is you are changing what the Volition Reigns does. That line, you control Enchanted Permanent, is affected by the fact that you have taken control of the Volition Reigns. So because it's affected, then we have to apply them in the other order. We have to apply your Volition Reigns first to take control of the other Volition Reigns. Then we're allowed to apply the effect of the second Volition Reigns, and that now says you control Enchanted Permanent, and now it's you guys out in the ether that controlled the Grizzly Bears all along. End result, you still control the Grizzly Bears. So it didn't actually matter in the end which one you targeted. But the rules that got us here are very different. One was timestamp order. There was no reason to do anything with the order that we apply the effects other than just apply them in the order that they were played. When we had Mind Control on the Bears and another Mind Control on the Bears. When we put Volition Reigns on another Volition Reigns, we're setting up a dependency because one of the effects changes what the other one does. Are you still with me? Are you still with me? Good, I hope so. Tell me in the chat if you're not, because I realise I'm taking this super slowly, but really, timestamp, dependency, we've done it. I've given you an example, a simple example of how to set dependency up, and I think you'll find that both results are quite intuitive. If you control my control effect, well then it's not my control effect anymore, it's kind of yours, so why shouldn't they chain through and give you control of the bears? Intuitive results, yes, like them. Let's give another couple of dependencies. This isn't a simple one. Scrambleverse is a bit of a weird card, but it's another way of me going, if I randomly give control using the Scrambleverse of each permanent to people, then that's how I can end up. Because of the Scrambleverse effect, I can be giving control of a mind control to somebody, and because the mind control effect is also trying to affect the Grizzly Bears, then we have dependency again. This time, mind control is dependent on the Scrambleverse, because again, mind control needs to know who its controller is before it can work out what it needs to do. So we apply the Scrambleverse first, work out where the mind control is, and now we know who controls the mind control, we know who controls the bears, because it's the same person, same player. Cool. Here's another example of dependency. Necrotic Ooze. As long as it's on the battlefield, it's got all the activated abilities of all the creature cards in all the graveyards. So we've got something in the graveyard that's got an activated ability, then Necrotic Ooze has it too. There's a nice card from Future Sight called Yixlid Jailer. Yixlid Jailer comes up a lot in layers kind of questions, because it's got a fairly unique thing of making everything lose abilities. And it's always interesting to see what happens when you try and apply abilities when there are other effects in play that would have them removed and so on. So Yixlid Jailer comes up a lot, but in this case it comes up because if I'm making all the cards in all the graveyards lose all the abilities, but I have another effect that says that Necrotic Ooze has all the activated abilities of all the creature cards and all the graveyards, then I need to work out how to apply these. And again, we have a dependency, because let's in the abstract say there is a thing. There's a thing in the graveyard and it has an activated ability. There's a thing in the graveyard and it has an activated ability. Necrotic Ooze thinks about applying its effect. Well, if I applied my effect, I would grant this activated ability to Necrotic Ooze. That's what I would do. Now let's think about the same situation if Yixlid Jailer was there. Yixlid Jailer goes, that card that's in the graveyard doesn't have the ability anymore. So if we applied that one first, then Necrotic Ooze goes, there are no abilities for me to apply, so I'm not going to get any. I'm not going to pick up any activated abilities from anywhere. So, therefore, applying Yixlid Jailer first changes what Necrotic Ooze does. We look at the end result of it. The end result would be different if we applied Yixlid Jailer first. Whereas applying Necrotic Ooze first doesn't do anything to Yixlid Jailer. There's no dependency like in the other direction. Therefore, the Ooze is dependent on the Jailer. We apply the Jailer first, so there are no abilities in the graveyards. So Necrotic Ooze doesn't get any activated abilities if both of these creatures are in play. Have I still got you? Do I still have everybody following along? Because that's another dependency. It's a simple one. Changing what something does, or what it applies to, or how it does what it does, is an example of dependency. So now I'm going to go to the classic dependency. This is the one that's mentioned a lot in judge circles, because it's a most recent example of a fairly complicated ability. It's been mentioned in the chat, what if the Jailer's in the graveyard? Nothing especially important happens if the Jailer's in the graveyard, because Necrotic Ooze only picks up activated abilities, and Yixlid Jailer has only static abilities, and Necrotic Ooze never picks that up. But, yeah, interesting call, interesting question, which we'll get to. So, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth is a land, it's a legendary land, and it makes every land a swamp in addition to its other land types. Okay, but by virtue of being a legendary land with a nice fancy name, that's clearly not a basic land. I know something about non-basic lands. Non-basic lands can be turned into mountains by Blood Moon. So now we have an interesting thing going on, because especially if we look just at Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, we have two effects that are trying to do something to this land. Urborg is trying to do something to itself. It's trying to say, I'm a swamp, in addition to everything that I already was. So Urborg is trying to say that I'm a swamp. And Blood Moon is trying to say, you're a mountain. And the interesting thing about changing something into a basic land type, but without saying in addition to its other types, is the way you actually achieve that is you wipe the text box of the card completely. Turning something into a mountain means you remove all of its other abilities. So the effect of turning Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth into a mountain would actually be to erase the line that contains the ability that says, actually, I'm going to turn myself into a swamp. So, let's think about dependency here. Does one cause the other to no longer apply, or does it change how it applies, or does it change what it applies to? Well, it does change what it applies to in this sense, because, the first clause, we're saying applying one first would cause the other to no longer apply. If I turn everything into swamps, I'm not changing their basicness. So Blood Moon doesn't care about Urborg. There's no dependency in that direction. But if Blood Moon is going to turn Urborg into a mountain, which comes at the same time as... but you achieve that by wiping the text box, then because Urborg would be turned into a mountain without an ability in this same type changing layer, then Urborg's going to turn into a mountain, lose its ability before it gets a chance to apply it, so it doesn't apply. And Blood Moon turns Urborg into a mountain, and Urborg doesn't do anything to any other lands because it didn't get the chance to apply. Blood Moon had to be applied first, and once that was done, Urborg ceased to apply. So, dependency, done. I've got two more dependency examples to drill in here. One was actually discovered fairly recently, and it was kind of discovered recently because there's actually, right now, if you were to read the rules word for word, this isn't a dependency at all, but it's ruled that actually there is a dependency here, and so there is a comprehensive rules change coming to make this actually the case. But I want you to look at Sutured Ghoul here. Sutured Ghoul has something called a characteristic defining ability, which I will touch on momentarily, to say what its power and toughness is. So it's linked to its second ability, The second ability says when it enters the battlefield, exile any number of creature cards from your graveyard. And the third ability said that its power and toughness is going to be equal to the total power and total toughness of the exiled cards. But what happens if, amongst those cards, you exile Tarmogoyf? Now, the interesting thing about Tarmogoyf is you don't know what its power and toughness is intrinsically. It, again, has a characteristic defining ability that tells you what its power and toughness is. Once upon a time, way back when, I don't remember exactly, we used to say that power and toughness things for characteristic defining abilities, they just read as 0 everywhere other than in play. And that got reversed so that they work everywhere. I'm not entirely sure I remember the reason why that was changed. I think it was something to do with Wild Pair, searching creatures out of libraries, and we decided, well, the characteristic defining abilities should probably work in libraries, so there's no reason why they shouldn't work everywhere. So crucially, Tarmogoyf's ability works in the exile zone as well. So whilst Tarmogoyf is exiled, its power and toughness depends on the number of card types, the number of unique card types that are in all the graveyards. So, what does Sutured Ghoul do? Its power and toughness is equal to the total power and toughness of all the cards you exiled. That means, in order to work out what this does, you have to have worked out Tarmogoyf's power and toughness first. So regardless of the way the two cards entered the battlefield, jumped around, got exiled, whatever zones they're going in, you have to work out Tarmogoyf's power and toughness before you work out Sutured Ghoul's power and toughness. And it's another example of dependency. We've got to work out one because it changes what the other one does. There's another example of dependency, and it's been mentioned in the stream already. Somebody mentioned Humility and Opalescence. I'm going to show you the cards first, because they're old cards, they do crazy things. It turns out, way back in, Magic's weird times, they did some really crazy stuff with Magic cards. And, well, I'll let you read this one. Opalescence. Each other enchantment is a creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost. And it's still an enchantment. Okay? Not so much of a problem here. Then we have Humility. Humility is an enchantment. It makes all creatures lose all their abilities and turn into 1/1 creatures. There's a dependency here. The dependency is actually in the part of the layers once we get to power and toughness. Now I realise, because I'm doing this backwards, I haven't mentioned a key thing about dependencies, and that is that dependencies only exist in a single layer. So you can't have one effect be dependent on another effect if the effects apply in different layers. Now I realise, because I haven't actually crossed that layer bridge yet, then, well, you possibly won't understand until I come back to it, why there's no dependency between the first part of these abilities. But looking just purely at the power and toughness things here. Actually, sorry, is this a dependency? Have I got this wrong? Have I got this wrong here? This ability will set the enchantment's power and toughness to the converted mana cost of the enchantment. So Opalescence wants to set its power and toughness to 4/4 and wants to set Humility's power and toughness to 4/4. But Humility wants to set, because all of the creatures become 1/1s, it wants to set the power and toughness to 1/1. Is there a dependency between those effects? No, I don't think there is anymore, is there? There's no dependency there. We would just rely on timestamps to work that one out. Yeah, we'd just rely on timestamps to work that one out. Is there a dependency between the other part? Becoming a creature and losing all abilities, they happen in different places. Yeah, I don't think there's a dependency here at all. What was I talking about? Somebody will correct me in the chat if I've actually got that wrong. No, I thought I had another example of dependency. It's not at all. It's just stuff is happening in different layers and timestamps are going to get involved. I will come back to the Opalescence Humility interaction once I have got the rest of the layers ironed out, which we'll go to shortly. I want to touch on characteristic defining abilities before I get there. Characteristic defining abilities are important because within any particular layer, you apply them first. So you need to know how to recognise them. Characteristic defining abilities, well, they define characteristics. They define characteristics only on the card they're on. There's some other shenanigans in there, but they're generally quite easy to spot. I tried to find examples of characteristic defining abilities in amongst each of the layers, and these are the ones that I found. In layer 4, again, I'll get to them in a moment, layer 4 is where you work out what type you are. And there is a creature, many creatures. There's an ability here called Changeling. Changeling, as an ability, says that this card has every creature type and it has them at all times. That's an ability that sets a characteristic of the card, the characteristic being its types. So this is an example of a characteristic defining ability that applies in layer 4, which is when we apply types. Excellent. This used to be, up until fairly recently, an example of a characteristic defining ability that applied in layer 5, which is all about colours. The reason I say that this used to be a characteristic defining ability is because Dryad Arbor doesn't actually have that ability on it anymore. Dryad Arbor is green is not on the oracle text of this card at all. It ain't there. Gone. It's been replaced by a colour indicator using the colour indicator technology that double-faced cards introduced. So there used, once upon a time, to be a way to have colour changing abilities interact in a vaguely interesting way that involved this characteristic defining ability. But they got rid of them. They don't exist. Except there's one left, which is this one here. Ghostfire has an ability on it that says that Ghostfire is colourless. Because there's no colourless colour indicator, because that doesn't make much sense, I guess. What would a colourless colour indicator actually mean? What would it look like? I don't know. Because Ghostfire is pretty much the only remaining example of a characteristic defining ability that deals in layer 5, which is in colours. There you go. And in layer 7, which is when you work out power and toughness, there's plenty of cards that have characteristic defining abilities there. We saw a couple of examples of them earlier. The stars in the corner, they have the stars in the corner. They kind of indicate that there's a characteristic defining ability going on to actually tell you what the power and toughness is. I'm being asked in the chat about Transguild Courier. Now, I know Transguild Courier had an ability that had all of the... It used to say, Transguild Courier is all colours, even if this card isn't in play. Now, I went to magiccards.info to look that up, and it doesn't seem to have the text anymore, but magiccards.info currently is missing the information on colour indicators. It doesn't have it as a thing. So if I go to wizards.com to look at their gatherer, and I look up Transguild Courier, then I will find out whether Transguild Courier has a colour indicator, except I've done the thing I always do with Gatherer, and I've searched by rules text instead of name. Here we go. Name. Transguild Courier. It has all 5 colour indicators. So yes, it doesn't have that ability anymore. Transguild Courier is just a 4-mana 3/3 with 5 colour indicators. And no abilities at all. Love it. Given that I've gone to the effort to find that card for you, for the sanity of those following along going, what on earth is Transguild Courier? There was a card back in the original Ravnica, and I'll pop it up on the stream now. There we go. Transguild Courier. Used to look like that. Doesn't have any abilities anymore. Gets pumped by Muruganda Petroglyphs. Oh, what a lovely card that is. I should pop that one into the stream. Okay, so we dealt with a load of dependencies. We dealt with some other stuff. Why do I have an example with those cards in? I don't know. Was I just... Oh, what have I done? What have I done? I've got an example with some shape-shifting kind of effects, and I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Look at my confused face. I have a confused face. Right, anyway, I was talking about characteristic defining abilities and how this isn't one anymore because of colour indicators. This still is one. And how this is one. There it is. Changeling, characteristic defining ability. And how this is one. So they're important because they always apply first in each layer. Oh yeah, is that what I was just looking? I just had examples of the different things. Yeah, that's right. I've just lined up a whole bunch of cards to illustrate the layers. That's what I've done. That's what I've done. Wow, crikey. Professional. Professional. I am professional. So, layers. What order do the layers actually come in, and how can we help you remember them? It's not that tricky. If you open up the comprehensive rules and look, rule 613, they're there. If you look up articles on the internet, they're there. If you just take the time to remember that stuff happens in layers, and there aren't that many of them, then you can remember them all. Here they go. Here we go. What layers are there? In the first layer, there are copy effects. Why do copy effects come first? Copy effects come first because you've got to know what you're dealing with before you do anything to it. So you apply effects like clone. There's also a couple of other effects that apply in the copy layer last, because what you're actually doing in the copy layer is you're working out an item's copyable characteristics. So if you had a card that was morphed, whilst you'd apply the copy effects first, if the card was then face down, there's a rule that says that face down creatures are 2/2s. Well, that applies after the copy effect, and it just has the result of setting the copyable values to 2/2. I can probably do a whole stream about copying things, so I won't go into more detail now for fear of cannibalising future material. But yes, layer 1, copy effects. That's a copy effect. Layer 2, control changing effects. We showed you one earlier, mind control. It changes control of a creature, so it applies in layer 2. Layer 2 is control. Layer 1 is copy. Layer 2 is control. Layer 3 almost never exists. There's hardly any cards that do anything in layer 3. They are text changing effects. Here's an example of one. I think this is the most recent example of one. Mind Bend lets you change the text of a permanent by replacing a colour word with another one. So if someone has got protection from green, then you can mind bend them to give them protection from black instead, because you're allowed to change green to black. You're not changing the abilities, you're just changing the text that generates the abilities. So here we go. That's a text changing effect. There really aren't many of them, which is one reason why it's difficult to remember that the layer even exists. Layer 1 is copy effects. Layer 2 is control effects. Layer 3 is text. Layer 4 is type. This is where types get set. Conspiracy is a great example because it sets types of stuff all over the place. You get to choose a creature type and apply it to everything. Everything gets set at that type. Types all over the place. What other kind of things set type? Well, I already mentioned as an example of a characteristic defining ability, Changeling. I already mentioned that one. Changeling is a characteristic defining ability that applies in this layer. You also have things like, yes, I showed you Blood Moon earlier. That's a type changing effect. Urborg, that's a type changing effect. They're all in this layer. So I brushed over this earlier, but I shall mention it again because it is important. Dependencies only exist between cards that are in the same layer. The only reason there can even possibly be a dependency between Urborg and Blood Moon is because they apply in the same layer. They apply in the type changing layer, which is layer 4. The only reason there could possibly have been a dependency between a Volition Reigns and another Volition Reigns is because they both apply in the control layer. Of course they do. It's the same card. It's difficult for them not to apply in the same layer. There are super type changing cards, I'm being told in the chat. Does that go in the same layer? Does that go in the same layer? I think it does. Leyline of Singularity is an example. It will make things legendary, changes the super type. Yes, I think it goes in there. There's nowhere else for it to go. Layer... Okay, so let's go with them again. Layer 1 is the copy layer. Layer 2 is control. Layer 3 is text. Layer 4 is type. Layer 5 is colour. There are things that change colour. Chaos Lace is a bad example of something, and I've only just realised quite how abstract that art is. That art really isn't telling me anything about what that card does. That can change things to red. Much better example, 8.5 Tails can turn permanents, can turn spells or permanents white until the end of turn. That's colour changing effect. I think they're pretty obvious. We know what the colours are. They're white, blue, black, and the other two that I'm sure some people play. So, clone, copy effect, layer 1. Mind control, control effects, layer 2. Mind bend, text effect, layer 3. Conspiracy, type effect, layer 4. Chaos Lace, amongst a million other things. Colour changing effects, layer 5. Abilities. Abilities are changed in layer 6. They're the ones that are changed next. Creatures your opponents control lose flying till end of turn. If green was spent, and creatures you control gain flying till end of turn if blue was spent. It's the flying, it's the gaining and losing of flying happens in layer 6. Again, the only reason that there can be a dependency between Necrotic Ooze and Yixlid Jailer, my example from earlier, is because they apply in the same layer. It's the abilities layer. This is layer 6. Layer 7 is the power and toughness layer. This is where all your power and toughness calculations happen. Now, because there's quite a lot of effects in here, we have put them into 5 sub-layers. Now, as a bit of a reminder, it's not strictly necessary, I guess, to spell it out this way, but Tarmogoyf, having a characteristic defining ability that sets Paul? I just read the word power and changed it to my name. Some kind of Freudian slip there, I'm sure. It's got an ability, an intrinsic ability that sets its own power and toughness. That's a characteristic defining ability. That is layer 7A. Now, it's kind of unnecessary. If we always remembered that characteristic defining abilities went first in a layer, then we know that 7A has to be characteristic defining abilities. It would be utterly inconsistent to have them anywhere else. Then, the other 4 sub-layers, well, there's, again, it's a fairly easy way to put them together. You've got to know what you're dealing with before you can change it. That's why you put characteristic defining abilities first, and that is why you also have, you then, in 7B, you put your power and toughness setting abilities. And a whole bunch of my examples have fallen off the end of here, so I'm going to have to do them live. Power and toughness setting abilities. Oh no, I can use humility for that one. That sets a power and toughness. It does something else as well, but it sets power and toughness to 1-1. So that applies in 7B. Then there's in 7C, you've got your changing of the power and toughness, which, like Giant Growth. Giant Growth gives something +3/+3. That changing that power is fine. I'm gonna have to just go off air for a moment. I'll be back very